Just this week we got a new way to make 2D games with Unreal Engine 5. Outside of providing a state machine, Anim Notifies, and a system for directional animations similarly to PaperZD, it also comes with some awesome additional features. There's a skin system that allows you to reuse the same animation setup for multiple characters, a system for mirroring sprites which allows you to get rid of duplication and optimize memory usage, and best of all, it comes with a layer system that enables you to match animations on multiple flipbooks, making it easy to change the held weapon or attach armor pieces to your characters. And no, sadly this is not an official edition by Epic Games since hell hasn't frozen over yet, but it is a plugin called 2D Actor Plus made by one of our Discord members. It's currently in beta and the personal license is free for a limited time until it becomes a paid plugin starting next week, so make sure to grab it while you can. Since I wanted to let you guys know as soon as possible, this video is not a full tutorial but just a quick overview of these features, and I also want to show you some examples of how to use them. The plugin can just be added to a project from Fab, but this is already where it differs a lot from PaperZD. Instead of being added on the plugin level, it just puts this folder into your project. It comes with blueprints, editor tools, profiles, and some sample sprites. To just quickly test it out, we want to use this 2D Actor Plus sample game mode, so I want to show the world settings and then use the game mode override to set it up. This gives us a side-scrolling mannequin character that is beautifully drawn and comes with a punch, kick, and special attack animation using the 2D Actor Plus system. When we go into the game mode settings and look at the default pawn, we can also find an RPG sample character in there. When I press play, I now have a different mannequin which has animations for 4 different directions like you have in most 2D and 2.5D RPGs, and if I hold shift, the character becomes faster and plays a run animation. So these two sample characters don't show off all of the available features, but just the state machine for handling animations and the sprite direction profiles. So before jumping into the advanced features, let's have a quick look on how this even works. When we look at the blueprints folder and then open up base classes, you can see this BP 2D Actor Plus. And this has all of the necessary functionality for handling animations built up with different blueprint functions. And yes, 2D Actor Plus is actually built completely in blueprints, which makes it easier to understand what is actually happening behind the scenes and allows you to make adjustments if needed at the cost of some performance in comparison to C++. But unless you have a very large amount of characters active, the performance difference will be negligible. If we now look at the fighter character, we can see that when we press a button, it then calls these functions from the parent actor to apply movement or play one-off animations like the attacks. It also uses this end animation event to handle when the character can execute the next action and when it can start moving again. In order for all of this to work, it has this sprite animation profile and the sprite direction profile set up here in the parameters. And we can also find these assets in the folder. When we look at the one for the fighter, it is just a data table which specifies the frames and other properties for each animation. And by the way, the frame signals map down here is basically how to set up Anim Notifies, and I'll get into that later. But yeah, this system works with a single flipbook and there's no need for us to have a separate flipbook for each animation since we just specify the frames here in this asset. In the direction profiles, you have these common presets like 2 directions mirrored, 4 directions, and so on, and these just specify the amount of directions our character has. And if we also look at the animation profile for the RPG character, we see that it's very simple and just knows which direction is which if your sprite sheet is laid out correctly. I now want to look into the first advanced feature of 2D Actor Plus, which is the skin system. But before that, just a quick shout out to my JRPG masterclass, which I released last month. It will teach you how to make gorgeous 2.5D JRPGs with turn-based combat in Unreal Engine 5, and you can currently get it for the cheaper early access price, with the remaining modules releasing until March. This week I'll release the inventory system and consumable items, so if that sounds interesting to you, check it out from the link in the description. To try the skin system, I just followed their documentation and grabbed one of their free characters from itch.io, which has 2 different variants. I then just went through the steps of setting up the basics until I had a character with an idle, walk, and attack animation. And applying the other skin to it is shockingly easy. All I have to do is change the flipbook here in the character. Well, almost. I also have to set the flipbook to 1 FPS or it breaks, but that's really all we have to do to apply a skin or create a new character, as long as the sprite sheet has the same setup with the same amount of frames. And if you've only made very small scale games, this might not seem like a big deal, but creating variants like this is actually where PaperZD falls short due to its architecture. Having child animation blueprints or another way of applying skins like this is actually the most requested feature. However, it's extremely hard to implement due to PaperZD having all of these nice custom editors and not being data-driven in the same way 2D Actor Plus is. So to use my JRPG as an example, even though all of our field characters have the exact same animations, since we're using PaperZD, we have to go through the cumbersome process of creating a new animation source and a new animation blueprint for every single character. And we also have to define all of the animations for each direction every time. Now, if your team has 4 to 8 members, that's just like 1 hour of extra work and not the end of the world, but if you have maybe 100 different NPC types, you don't want to use PaperZD for that. And I could see myself using PaperZD for my party members to get the nice visual editors, and 2D Actor Plus for NPCs to get maximum reusability. Now that we understand how the basics work and also how the skin system works, let's look at the next advanced feature, which are layered sprites. This allows us to attach armor or weapons to our characters, but it could also be used for other things. The hero asset also came with the sword attack sprite sheet, which has the same width and height per cell as our character. So as opposed to just attaching a static object to a socket like we do with base Paper 2D, here you'll want to match the cell size to your character. I then added a flipbook component below the sprite, set the flipbook for the sword slash, and then moved it slightly into the foreground. At this point, it would just randomly play instead of playing in sync with the attack animation, since the sprite sheet for the sword is optimized by not having empty frames. The proposed solution from the documentation is to set the frame run of the first empty frame to whatever value is needed to skip towards the attack animation, and that worked out quite nicely. Now we have the character with its own flipbook and a flipbook for the sword, which we could then replace with maybe a flipbook for an axe or maybe a different sword if we pick that up in the game. And then lastly, I just used the Notify functionality by defining the frames of starting the attack and ending the attack, and then attached a box collision to the character to detect overlaps. Next, I subscribed to the frame signal event and then turned the hitbox on or off depending on the signal name, and also added an overlap event to just launch any character we hit for demonstration, which then allows us to launch this mannequin up, and of course you could instead just apply damage or do whatever you want here. But this is the equivalent to the Notify system that we have in PaperZD. On a side note, it also has this editor tool that you can open with right click and run editor utility widget, and if you have a character selected, you can then just preview the animations in game and just see what they look like. And you can also change the movement speed to see how the animation adapts depending on that. And the developer also just told me that if you rotate a multi-directional sprite in the editor, you can see it update even if you're not running the game, which I think is very cool. So you can set up the proper starting direction here. So what is the verdict? Well, I think 2D Actor Plus is great and features like the skin system and layer system are amazing. Because programming these by yourself and making them work with multi-directional animations would take quite a lot of time and effort, and that is the reason I avoided this topic so far. But even just for the base animation system, the fact that you don't have to specify the frames for each direction and can just use one of the direction profile presets makes things super easy. Now, because it is a data-driven system without much visualization, it might take you a bit to wrap your head around this, and it might not be quite as intuitive as PaperZD, which gives you a workflow that mimics what you also do with 3D skeletal meshes in Unreal. But it's definitely worth learning, it only took me about an hour to pick up. We also got to keep in mind that this is still just the first beta version and the developer made it available for free to gather feedback and make improvements. So we might see some nicer visualizations over time that make things a bit more obvious. Now, should you instantly drop PaperZD and use this instead? Well, it comes down to personal preference, and the fact that PaperZD is free forever makes it more accessible to everyone. But yes, this plugin can do most things that we now use PaperZD for, but it does it in a different way. So I can totally see myself using PaperZD for my main character and party members to get nice visual editors, and use 2D Actor Plus for situations where I want to have a large variety of NPCs or need layers for armor and weapons. Again, the plugin is free for the rest of the week only, so make sure to claim it quickly, and please also give it a rating because that would give the developer something to show Epic Games and maybe get an Epic Mega Grant. Getting more tools for Paper 2D is great and I definitely want to support this project, so please give it a try. And that's pretty much it for the overview. As always, a huge thanks to my patrons and YouTube channel members.